Before the world calls Africa the marketplace of the future, the world must stop treating Africa like the raw material warehouse for everyone else's future. Before there is chocolate in a store, there is a farmer. Before there is coffee in a cafe, there is a community. Before there's fabric on a runway, there is an artist, a culture, a history, and a pair of hands. Before music travels around the world, there is a voice that came from somewhere. But too often, the finished product travels further than the name of the person who created its value. The commodity becomes famous. The farmer remains invisible. The design becomes popular. The artist remains unknown. The music crosses borders, but the community that gave birth to it is forgotten. That must change, because Africa is not emerging. Africa is arriving, not as a charity case, not as a backdrop, not merely as a source of raw materials. Africa is arriving as a producer, as an innovator, as a storyteller, as a destination, as a trading partner, and as one of the most important marketplaces the world has ever seen. What's up, everyone? This is Joshua T. Berglan, the world's mayor, coming to you from Limbe, Cameroon, and this is the World's Mayor Experience. Today I want to introduce a vision that could transform the way the world sees, experiences, and does business with Africa. It's called the World's Fair Experience. A modern World's Fair for African products, producers, communities, cultures, innovations, farms, food, fashion, music, tourism, and trade. And the message behind it is simple. Africa is not emerging. Africa is arriving. For years, Africa has been described as an emerging market, but that language can make it sound as though Africa is only now becoming valuable. Africa has always been valuable. Its land has always been valuable. Its resources have always been valuable. Its cultures have always been valuable. Its farmers, creators, entrepreneurs, inventors, musicians, designers, chefs, builders, and storytellers have always been valuable. What is changing is not Africa's value. What is changing is Africa's ability to document that value, package that value, distribute that value, protect that value, and profit from that value. Do not confuse underexposure with lack of value. Do not confuse limited infrastructure with limited intelligence. Do not confuse an unbranded product with an unworthy product. Do not confuse a missing website with a missing vision, and never confuse a lack of visibility with a lack of greatness. Africa is not waiting for the world to make it valuable. Africa is building the systems required to keep more of the value it has always created. That is the shift. That is the opportunity. And that is why the world needs a new kind of World's Fair. When most people hear the words World's Fair, they imagine a massive physical event. They imagine countries presenting their culture, inventions, food, architecture, technology, and a vision for the future. But what if we rebuilt that idea for the world we live in now? What if the new World's Fair did not happen only once every few years, but it happened every week? What if it existed online and inside physical communities? What if people did not have to travel across the world just to discover an African farmer, founder, product, artist, destination, or opportunity? What if every podcast episode became a pavilion? What if every video became a doorway? What if every story became a bridge between a producer and a marketplace? That is the World's Fair Experience. It is not simply a podcast about Africa. It is a marketplace powered by African stories. It is a media universe, a trade showcase, a cultural celebration, a tourism gateway, a discovery platform, a classroom, a storefront, and a meeting place for producers, buyers, investors, travelers, distributors, communities, and collaborators. The podcast becomes the front door, the marketplace becomes the back end, and the story becomes the bridge. A bridge that moves people from curiosity to trust, from trust to relationship, and from relationship to action. That action could be buying a product, booking a trip, stocking a store, supporting a farm, hiring a creator, licensing an invention, partnering with a community, investing in infrastructure, or helping a local solution reach more people. This is not just content. This is economic architecture. Here's how the format could work. Every episode introduces the world to one commodity, one community, one founder, one farmer, one product, one region, and one solution. One commodity tells us what is being produced. One community tells us where the value comes from. One founder shows us the vision. One farmer shows us the foundation. One product shows us what is possible. One region gives us the culture and context. And one solution shows us how the opportunity can grow. Imagine an episode about cocoa, but instead of only discussing cocoa prices, we meet the farmer. We see the land. We hear the history of the community. We learn how the cocoa is grown. We meet the entrepreneur turning the cocoa into chocolate, skincare, beverages, medicine, fertilizer, or any other value-added product. We identify the obstacles preventing that product from reaching larger markets. And then we show buyers, distributors, investors, tourists, and collaborators exactly how they can participate. That is no longer a podcast about a commodity. That is an economic doorway. Imagine an episode about coffee. We do not simply show a bag of beans. We introduce the world to the soil, the altitude, the harvesting process, the flavors, the history, the people, the challenges, the opportunity, and the dream behind the product. Now the customer is not simply buying coffee, they are entering a story. Story turns a product into an experience. Story turns a transaction into a relationship. Story turns a commodity into an identity. And identity allows value to travel without leaving its creator behind. The world already consumes Africa. The world consumes African resources, African flavors, African rhythms, African designs, African minerals, African labor, African ideas, African athletes, African stories, and African creativity. But the world does not always know Africa's name. People enjoy the chocolate without knowing the farmer. They drink the coffee without knowing the village. They wear the design without knowing the artisan. They dance to the rhythm without understanding its origin. They use the resource without seeing the community that lives above it. That is not simply a visibility problem. That is value being separated from identity. And when value becomes separated from identity, the people creating that value become easier to ignore, underpay, replace, or erase. This is why media matters, because whoever controls the story controls the value. Let me say that again. Whoever controls the story controls the value. If someone else controls the customer relationship, they can decide how much money reaches the producer. If someone else owns the photographs, footage, platform, audience, customer data, and distribution, then someone else controls the economic power created by that visibility. Africa cannot only appear in the story. Africa must own the microphone. Africa must own the camera. Africa must own the footage. Africa must own the platform. Africa must own the intellectual property. Africa must own the storefront, and Africa must participate in the wealth its stories generate. Visibility without ownership can become another form of extraction. Visibility combined with ownership becomes sovereignty. Some people still treat media as decoration. They think media is something you add after the real work is finished. You build the product, and then you create a post. You grow the food, then you take a photograph. You launch the company, and then you tell the story. But that is backwards. It's way backwards. Media is not what you add after the economy is built. Media helps build the economy. Because people cannot support what they cannot see. They cannot trust what they do not understand. They cannot buy what they cannot find. They cannot visit a place they have never been introduced to. And they cannot invest in an opportunity that has never been clearly communicated. Media creates visibility. Visibility creates familiarity. Familiarity can create trust. Trust can create demand. Demand can create transactions. Transactions can create jobs. Jobs strengthen families. And stronger families can help rebuild communities. That is why media is not vanity. Media is infrastructure. A road moves products. Media moves belief. A port connects goods to markets. Media connects meanings to markets. A payment system moves money. Media gives people a reason to spend the money. Trade needs highways, but every highway needs a voice. Too many powerful stories end with applause. We watch the video, we admire the person, we feel inspired, we leave a comment, and then we keep scrolling. But the farmer does not need another video that makes people emotional for 30 seconds and then sends them nowhere. The founder does not need another article that calls them inspiring but gives the reader no way to purchase the product. The community does not need another documentary that wins awards while the people in the documentary remain disconnected from opportunity. Every story must lead somewhere. Every story should have a doorway. Buy the product, visit the region, book the experience, contact the producer, stock the item, license the idea, support the solution, invest in the infrastructure. Join the project, share the opportunity. The farmer deserves more than a feature. The farmer deserves a path to market. The founder deserves more than exposure. The founder deserves access. The artisan deserves more than praise. The artisan deserves customers. And the community deserves more than representation. The community deserves participation. Media without a pathway to action is attention with nowhere to go. Commerce without story is inventory without demand. But when we connect story, ownership, and commerce, we create movement. And this cannot be built around making the world feel sorry for Africa. Africa does not need another global campaign presenting the continent as helpless. African entrepreneurs should not have to perform their pain just to receive an opportunity. We do not need more systems asking the world to save Africa. We need systems that make it easier to see Africa, trust Africa, buy from Africa, visit Africa, partner with Africa, invest in Africa, and build with Africa. That is a completely different invitation. It is not, look at these poor people. It is, look at this extraordinary product. Meet this brilliant founder. Visit this beautiful region. Taste this food. Experience this culture. Discover this innovation. Partner with this producer. Help take this proven solution to the next level. That is dignity. That is trade. That is partnership. That is ownership. It is not aid. It is architecture. Since coming to Cameroon, I have walked into rooms filled with people who had powerful ideas but limited access to traditional media tools. Some had no studio, no camera crew, no expensive equipment. Some did not have a laptop. Actually, most didn't. Most were working with a cell phone. But I watched that phone become a studio, a publishing house, a podcast network, a design company, a storefront, a classroom, a stage, a bridge to the rest of the world. I watched people who were timid with their voices begin to speak with passion. I watched people realize that their life experience was intellectual property. I've watched people understand that their knowledge could become income, a book, a podcast, a course, a product, a business, a movement, or a solution. I watched voices that once whispered begin to roar. That is why I know this vision is possible. The products are already here. The intelligence is already here. The entrepreneurs are already here. The farmers are already here. The storytellers are already here. The solutions are already here. That is, what is missing is not potential. What is missing is connected architecture. In the old World's Fair model, a country needed enormous resources to build a pavilion. In this model, the phone can become the pavilion. A farmer can show the land. A chef can demonstrate the recipe. A designer can reveal the process behind the clothing. A musician can explain the origin of sound, or of a sound. A community leader can represent a local solution. A tour operator can introduce the world to a destination. A student can interview an elder. A founder can demonstrate a product. One person with a phone can document an entire value chain. The farm, the production, the packaging, the people, the culture, the challenges, the customer, the transformation, and the opportunity. The phone is not merely a communication device. The phone can become a trade tool, a trust tool, a sales tool, a preservation tool, and an ownership tool. The phone is the studio. The community is the network. The product is the invitation, and the world is the audience. Think about what one properly developed episode could become: a podcast, a documentary, a multimedia article, a series of short videos, a product page, a digital storefront, a buyer's guide, a tourism feature, a classroom lesson, a founder profile, an investment overview, a live conversation, a virtual booth, a physical exhibition, and a permanent digital archive. Now imagine doing that every week. One commodity, one community, one founder, one farmer, one product, one region, one solution. Over time, we would not simply have a collection of episodes. We would have created a living map of African value, a searchable library of producers, a discovery platform for products, a marketplace for buyers, a gateway for tourism, a database of solutions, and a growing record of the people shaping Africa's future. This is how a podcast becomes more than a podcast. This is how media becomes a marketplace. This is how stories become infrastructure. And imagine taking this vision into physical spaces. Farmers displaying products beside chefs who transform those products into food. Fashion designers presenting clothing made from regional materials. Musicians performing while the stories behind the music appears on the screens. Innovators demonstrating solutions designed for local challenges. Tour operators introducing people to destinations they have never seen. Buyers meeting producers directly. Investors listening to founders explain what they have already built. Students interviewing elders preserving knowledge that could otherwise disappear. Communities broadcasting the entire experience to the world from their own platforms. There could be tastings, product demonstrations, film screenings, fashion showcases, live podcast, founder pitches, culture performances, tourism experiences, trade meetings, workshops, digital storefronts, and virtual access for people unable to attend physically. This would not be a museum of African culture. It would be a marketplace for African possibility. Not a display of what Africa used to be, a declaration of what Africa is building now. The next global African brand may already exist. It may be sitting on a table in a village with no label. It may be a recipe known only inside one community. It may be an agriculture process passed from one generation to another. It may be a fashion design created by hand. It may be a tourism destination that does not appear in international travel guides. It may be a brilliant founder who has never been given the opportunity to present their idea to the right audience. The problem may not be the product. The problem may be that the product has never been documented, branded, explained, protected, and connected to a marketplace. The future will belong to the people who connect value to identity, identity to story, story to trust, trust to ownership, and ownership to a marketplace. So who is this for? It is for the farmer who knows the world needs what they grow, the founder building a solution with limited visibility, the artisan protecting a craft, the chef preserving a recipe, the musician carrying the sound of a community, the designer transforming culture into fashion, the filmmaker documenting stories, the student learning to use a phone as a studio, the shopkeeper who understands the needs of the neighborhood, the buyer searching for new products, the distributor seeking reliable partners, the investor looking beyond headlines toward real people building real solutions, the diaspora seeking a meaningful connection. But this is not an invitation to spectate. It is an invitation to build. The mission does not need more applause. The mission needs builders. People willing to document the products, tell the stories, verify the information, build the storefronts, open the markets, train the creators, protect the intellectual property, develop the experiences, and ensure that people creating the value remain connected to the value. Africa is not emerging, Africa is arriving. Africa is arriving through the farmer who refuses to remain invisible, through the founder who builds without waiting for permission, through the young creator turning a cell phone into a media company, through the artisan protecting generations of knowledge, through the producer who decides to own the brand, not merely supply the raw material. Africa is arriving with food, with fashion, with music, with technology, with resources, with culture, with solutions, with stories, with knowledge, and with an invitation for the world to build something different. Not extraction disguised as partnership, not charity disguised as control, not exposure that leaves the creator invisible, but trade built on dignity, media built on ownership, partnership built on transparency, tourism built on respect, investment built on relationship, and marketplaces built to ensure that value does not abandon the people who created it. Imagine opening one platform and journeying across Africa, meeting a cocoa farmer in Cameroon, discovering a coffee producer in Uganda, visiting a fashion designer in Ghana, learning from an agriculture innovator in Kenya, hearing music from Nigeria, experiencing technology from Rwanda, discovering tourism opportunities across the continent, purchasing products directly from African entrepreneurs, and understanding the people, places, and cultures behind everything you see. That is the World's Fair experience. A modern World's Fair for African producers and entrepreneurs, powered by media, trade, storytelling, technology, culture, and digital marketplaces. The podcast is the front door. The marketplace is the back end. The story is the bridge. The producer is the foundation. And ownership is the standard. This is bigger than a podcast. This is way bigger than a television show. It is way bigger than any event. It is an opportunity to build a living, breathing marketplace where Africa can introduce itself to the world on its own terms. Africa does not need to wait to be discovered. Africa is already building. Africa is already producing. Africa is already innovating. Africa is already creating. Africa is already leading. The world simply needs a better doorway. Let's build it. This has been the World's Mayor Experience. I am Joshua T. Berglan, the World's Mayor, coming to you right here in Limbe, Cameroon. Remember, whoever controls the story controls the value, and the future belongs to the people willing to own both. Africa is not emerging. Africa is arriving. God bless Cameroon, God bless Africa, and God bless every farmer, founder, artist, innovator, builder, and community preparing to meet the world on its own terms.